We are here on page 87, Capital Improvements Fund Expenditure, under FY 2012 amended budget, $5 million for YMCA. It's too bad we don't have that money anymore. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. Is there anyone else who would like to address the board on this particular public hearing? Hearing no further comments, the public hearing period is closed. The next public hearing, does the board want to take a 10-minute break, or do you want to keep on? That's fine. Board will take a push on. Okay. Number 10, an ordinance to repeal and replace Chapter 50. All right, come on, we're going on. Yeah, he can take a break. If you need a break, go ahead. Take it. It's 20 after 10. We need to move ahead. An ordinance to repeal and replace Chapter 50, fireworks of the Caroline County Code, to prohibit non-exempt fireworks and to require permitting by the fire official.
Mr. Akers, if someone left a cell phone up here, it appears, if that belongs to someone.
Mr. Garnett.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and board members. Tonight's public hearing deals with the repeal and replacement of Chapter 50 in the Ordinance Caroline County Code that addresses display of fireworks. From our past discussions, the ordinance that you have tonight for consideration and solicit of comments brings us in line with changes that were made to the state fire code, giving the county the authority to regulate these. It also addresses safety concerns and property owner rights. It addresses the number of displays that can be held a year and the time that these displays will take place. It increases the insurance bond of our previous ordinance, and it addresses the location of displays in reference to their proximity of the adjacent property owners. Certainly be glad to answer any questions that you may have at this time or throughout the rest of the evening concerning this issue.
Board members have any questions of Mr. Garnett before we open the public hearing?
One quick statement.
Go ahead.
Mr. Garnett, define non-exempt fireworks for the audience and us, please.
Non-exempt fireworks are commercial fireworks that you would buy at a retail store such as a Walmart. These are fireworks that generally give off sparks on the ground and do not rise into the air and explode and make the larger starburst. These are what we would call consumer-grade fireworks.
And that's the only ones this ordinance would apply to.
Just to make sure I'm using this ordinance would address what I generally call commercial-grade fireworks, or fireworks that would rise into the air and do a display. It also allows or prohibits, it does not exempt fireworks that you would buy consumer grade.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, any other questions?
Mr. Garnett?
Yes.
Quick question. Again on the 1,000 feet. So if I'm setting off fireworks, I have to be 1,000 feet from my neighbor's nearest structure, is that what we're saying, or the neighbor's residence, is that what we're saying?
This particular draft addresses that you would have to be greater than 1,000 feet from a residential use or have written permission from your neighbor to proceed if you were less.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions?
More of a comment. This ordinance does not adhere to county-sponsored fireworks. Is that right?
That's correct. The last section of 50-4, the last sentence of this chapter, does not apply to firework displays conducted by or on behalf of the county.
Thank you.
All right. We will now declare the public hearing open. Mr. Pardon will read your name, and the next person, if you would, come down closer to the front so we can move on up to the podium. The same rules will apply for this public hearing as they have in the past public hearings.
First three names are Tammy Best, David Best, sorry, and Paula Newsdatter.
Tammy Best, Fort Royal District, and I told you guys earlier in the year that I am disabled. This fireworks has decreased the quality of my life. I am no longer able to walk without pain. As you saw, I have a limp. It won't be long before I'm in a cane, using a cane and in a wheelchair. I have multiple sclerosis. The stress of these fireworks is severely injuring my health. And also, I want to let you know that the noise from the fireworks is 190 decibels. That is the average noise for a professional firework. The average decibels for a gunshot is less than 100. A low-flying jet is less than 100. You are damaging people's hearing with 190 decibels of noise. And by the way, the noise ordinance doesn't apply. We've called the sheriff many times and been told he has a permit. Too bad. We don't care how noisy it is. You're not only scaring the animals that live on the farm, you're scaring the wildlife. Our bald eagles have disappeared from our property. The deer disappear for weeks. The squirrels, the other birds, they're all gone. I bought this property to enjoy the wildlife. It's all gone with these permits. And I want to let you know that that current certificate of insurance that the county supposedly has does not cover any damage to my property. I have filed a claim and it's been denied. They do not cover any damages unless he burns down my house. That is the only thing that's covered, and it's only covered to $100,000. That's not going to replace my house. That's not going to replace my property. These fireworks should be held in recreational areas just like the county has zoned. They do not belong in rural preservation, and especially with a resource-sensitive overlay. Those fireworks put out pollution. They produce smoke and dust that contain residues of heavy metals, sulfur-coated compounds, and some low concentrations of toxic waste. We don't need that in an area that you're trying to keep rural and have farms. And you also have wetlands back there. You don't need this kind of chemicals in that area. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Best.
Hello once again. I'm David Best, and I live in the Port Royal District. I want to thank you all over the last few months for your consideration of the changes being made to this ordinance, and especially want to thank Mr. Taylor for kind of championing this thing before the board and getting it to where it is now. And we also want to thank Chief Garnett for his efforts in making, bringing this thing to where it's at right now. We've been through about 4 different versions of the ordinance, I think. I think we've been through, and you saw the video we provided you. You listened to the noise level. My wife alluded to it a little bit, but once again, think about this. We got trees all around us that are 40, 50 feet high trees. There's an echo. Everybody's been out in the country, heard the echo. A gunshot goes off. It sounds a lot louder out there because of that echo, and the containment within the trees. That's one of the big factors that causes the animals to have so many problems. It's just that whole noise problem out there. And as long as you have these grades of fireworks, you didn't notice it as much when they used the regular, store-bought type fireworks that stayed at a low level and didn't get shot up into the air. Those were, and the stuff that's allowed under this code still allow them to use that kind of fireworks because the impact is very low and the noise doesn't carry the same way. The light, all of that, you saw that in the video, it made a difference on the animals. It's really hard, especially on the horses, and causes the problems. But we do hope that with this, if this ordinance passes, y'all won't probably, at least from this issue, we won't have to come before y'all anymore. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Best.
Next is Paula Newstatter, followed by Jake Walther and Randy Walther.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Paula Newstatter, and I live at Bell Hill. in the Port Royal District next door to the Bests. We have fireworks on our property 2 or 3 times a year and always obtain a proper permit and notify our neighbors. We host a church picnic there, and the first year we held the picnic, we did have the display at the top field because of the many elderly people that were in attendance. But they were louder up there than I expected, and out of consideration for the neighbors, we did move the fireworks back down to the bottom field, which is much farther away from their property, and it is at a 64-foot lower elevation than their property, and it's a big buffer of woods between there. On Memorial Day last weekend, the Laughlin's called my husband literally minutes before the fireworks were set to begin and complained that they were afraid that the fireworks would disturb their horse. We didn't even know they had a horse. But when the fireworks began, moments later, they called the police on us. So before the church picnic last summer, we went over and gave notice to both the Laughlin's and the Bests. This was the first time, Tammy Best, this was last summer, the first time she had ever said a word to us about any injury to her horse. We had never heard anything about that prior to last summer. And when we went to the Laughlin's to try to talk this over and neighborly work it out, they weren't interested in anything that we had to say. So when the 4th of July came around, our neighbors on the other side had a party with fireworks, and the police were called on us. At the end of August, the Bests deposited a very large pile of fresh horse manure, about 10 feet away from the front of our driveway, on their property, but right next to my driveway in August. That was nice. And then when Guy Fawkes came along, we notified the neighbors, both sets as usual, and the police were called to our home 3 times that night. In February, we received a call from a Cindy Tigner in the county saying that there had been a complaint that we had had a music festival at our property and we were selling tickets for it. That was not true. Last month when we came home, there's now a huge banner that is attached to the Best fence that connects to the front of my driveway, and it's got a spotlight and everything so it can be seen well at night. And it says, "Fireworks hurt horses, stop their abuse," and it's still there. A couple of weeks ago, we were down in the bottom field on our property shooting, and the police came, again, saying that they had received a call from the neighbors that we were shooting at their house. We were not. Like everyone else in the county, we have a right to use and enjoy our property as long as we obey the law and the county regulations. We have done that, and we have tried to consider our neighbors, be considerate of our neighbors in spite of these harassments. There are many ways to protect horses from startling noises: earplugs, background music, tranquilizers for very nervous horses, and they have been proven effective in helping horses deal with some of these noises. I lost my place, sorry. Oh, and many of these things are more helpful than, locking a horse in a confined space and when he's afraid. He may injure himself or even potentially the owner. We do a fireworks display 2 or 3 times a year, and each display lasts for 30 minutes. And that's hardly an unreasonable, excessive amount, 2 or 3 times a year. So I respectfully ask that this board uphold our right to continue to do fireworks just as we have in the past. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Newsetter.
Next is Jake Walther, followed by Randy Walther, Patrick Newstead.
Can you hear him without the mic?
Just push
Move
it.
the mic towards him. There you go.
There we go. Hello, my name is Jacob Walther. I am probably the cause for this meeting. I have founded a fireworks display company called Southern Exposure Pyrotechnics. The purpose of this company is to provide legal, safe fireworks displays to people who would otherwise drive out of state and purchase fireworks at a retail store to shoot off on their own property without any insurance or any sort of training or any of this. Prior to my spinal cord injury 5 years ago, I was a pyrotechnician for Ringling Brothers Circus, as well as a lighting technician. Since coming home, I now have both federal licenses and state licenses to be to possess, purchase, and use display fireworks, as well as what you guys would consider regulated commercial fireworks. The whole purpose of this is to take the fireworks out of the lay person's hand and put them into a trained person's hand. I've trained many crew members. I carry $1 million worth of liability insurance. I purchase, I pay for all the permit and go through all the application fees and work with all the applicable authorities having jurisdiction during any display. I abide by every single law, every single safety regulation that is out there, above and beyond anything that anybody has ever written. Yeah, and I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. But if I could answer any questions that any of the board may have about this situation, I gladly would like to do that at this time. Or I can pose for a photo too.
Thank you, Mr. Walter. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm from Stafford County, but Patrick and Paula Newstetter are close family friends of ours from the fellowship. They were gracious enough to help me out with my situation. I started this company after coming home and not having anything else to do other than play on the computer. Having a company, a way for me to hopefully help contribute to society and rather than just being a Social Security and Medicare mooch. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next is Randy Walther, followed by Patrick Newstetter.
Good evening. Well, Jake stole a lot of my thunder. I was going to talk a little bit about him, but what I really want to emphasize to you tonight, I think, is I'm a realtor, and I'm acutely aware of the fact that Virginia is a very strong personal property rights state. I think the issue here partly is going to be the fact that we have a couple of colliding viewpoints on personal property. But overall, an issue like this that is run by a professional company and has the ability to, well, bring joy to a lot of people, one isolated small incident like this that may end up affecting the entire county and all the property rights of quite a few property owners really does need to be considered by you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walton.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Taylor, board members, I admire your stamina. I'm Dr. Patrick Newstetter from Port Royal District. My wife, Paula, and I live on Petmire Hill Road, and we are immediate neighbours of Tammy and David Best, and next door but one to Catherine and Tom Laughlin. I've lived at this location for 26 years, and for the last 24 years of them have had firework displays. We have never had more than 3 in a year. They are brief, and we have provided advanced written notice to our neighbours. We're very aware that we're living in a rural preservation area, but we have had no mishaps or threats to property or woodlands, and have complied always in getting permits and cooperating with the fire department. Paula and I are distressed that there is a conflict with our neighbours, a conflict from their having horses that are upset by the fireworks. We know they have made their complaints known to the supervisors, to the Caroline Progress, to the website of the firework company that Jake Walther runs, and by the display of the large banner that Paula referred to that says "Fireworks harm horses, stop their abuse." They would appear to be trying to stop us from being able to have firework displays and are hoping that the supervisors will support them in this by changing the ordinance for the whole county. The previous owner of the property, both the Bests and the Laughlin's live on, Kathy Swaney, had horses who were totally impervious, so there was no conflict with her. The Robinsons, who live a few doors down the road on Pitmar Hill Road, have horses and have fireworks, and the church close by had fireworks, and their horses didn't suffer any ill effects. It should be noted that it's not unusual for horses to be in situations like battles and in reenactments where they're exposed to a lot of explosions. There are strategies for helping horses, as Paula mentioned, who are scared by fireworks, earplugs, tranquilizers, playing music to them, desensitizing them, moving them out of earshot for the display. The injuries claimed to the horses and themselves sound like they're the results of inappropriate handling. It becomes a conflict of interests or rights. Should we not be able to continue to have firework display as we have done for the last 24 years because they have come to live here and brought horses that are scared of fireworks? A neighborhood, I might add, that is right across the road from AP Hill and the explosions that take place there all the time, and where there is frequently shooting taking place on the Laughlin's property to the point where once the authorities had to come and ask them to desist. The draft ordinance, compared with those previously introduced, introduces many changes, such as large increases in the bond requirement, distance requirements, more stringent notifications, and permit application requirements, increasing fees and time limits and frequency limits. We are not happy with these changes, but in the spirit of compromise and considerations to the Bests and the Laughlin's, we are willing to accept them. We therefore urge the supervisors to pass this ordinance as in the draft, but without any modifications. Thank you.
What's the question? Well, he's saying pass the ordinance as it is in draft.
As it is now?
Yes. As in the draft that we were sent from the supervisors meeting on March the 6th.
Okay, thank you.
Which has the restrictions that were mentioned about the increased bond, the 1,000 feet distance.
Thank you.
We can live with that, so hopefully your your job is relatively easy.
Thank you. We'll get the clarification from Mark after the
Mr. Chairman, can I ask Mr. Garnett a question?
Public hearings.
How about let's, at the end of the public hearing, we'll do that, okay?
Next, Mary Robinson, Terry Robinson, and Karen Lambert.
I'm sorry? They had to leave, okay, thank you.
Karen Lambert, Catherine Laughlin, Tom Laughlin, Michael Linehan.
Karen Lambert, Reedy Church Voting District. I echo the sentiments of the Bests and the Laughlins to an extent, and but I think it's more than just a question of this instance. I think we need to look at the whole picture for the fireworks. I don't believe they fit into a rural preservation area. I hear about the property rights. Since it's a permitted use, it's not a by rights use. And I think that animals have a different, varying response to them. Tranquilizers may actually exacerbate the reaction and cause the animal to be hurt even more. Moving the animal can be costly. It's not like there's somebody just down the road that will allow you to board a horse for a day. And then when you have a number of animals, it's even more trying. But I think we need to look to the future and try to be more than just following everyone else. I mentioned before, I didn't hear any mention of it. I don't know if you all looked into it at all about the air cannons, because that would help my situation where you would allow in a recreational district fireworks to be used. So that you put that district there, but you could still help protect neighbors that are abutting it. You also say 1,000 feet is enough, but you only mention residents. You don't take into account that there may be barns a lot closer than that 1,000 feet, and I think that needs to be looked at. And originally you had talked about 1,500 feet, and every 500 feet really helps when you have to put up with this, even if it's once a year, 3 times a year, or possibly even more. So although I think you're heading in the right direction, I think you need to look at things a little closer. Because, like I say, you're saying that it's your right to use your property that way affects other people's right to enjoy theirs. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lambert.
Good evening again.
Good evening.
Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I had written a little statement I wanted to do, but based on the accusations that have been made of me and my husband, I need to clarify. I FOIA'd last year at the Fire and Rescue Department the permits that had been issued to our neighbor for the display of professional fireworks. They claim they have been doing this for empty ops year. The first permit ever issued was in 2009. Which means if they were doing it for all those many years, they were doing it without a permit. I also want to clarify that when they have fireworks, it's not just the 30-minute time. During that afternoon, they are launching fireworks to see if they can gauge the direction of the wind, okay? And after the fireworks displays are over, if there are any fireworks that have not been detonated, they will do it instead of dousing them and getting rid of them. So you don't know how long it's going to last. The statement that I had prepared for tonight is as follows. I have been appearing before the board since July of 2011. At that meeting, I presented a petition to the board signed by 19 residents, all neighbors of Woodford, requesting that the board please review the issuance of permits for the display of commercial fireworks on private property. We, the undersigned of the petition presented to you in July, are confident that the Fire and Rescue Department will be judicious in granting permits for the display of commercial fireworks, especially when held on private property, thus ensuring the safety to life and property. The Fire and Rescue Department is keenly aware of their limitations in responding to fires in our remote areas, specifically the limit of water carried by fire trucks, since there are no fire hydrants in the area that we live. I am here tonight to thank you all and the Fire and Rescue Department for the efforts put forth in revising the Caroline County Fireworks Ordinance. Thank you again for your support and for the opportunity to address the board one more time.
Thank you, Mr. Laughlin. Thank you, gentlemen. Again, a few things my wife left out I want to mention. The phone call and the information on the fireworks that Paula Neustadt mentioned, she didn't give it to us. It was actually the neighbor, Tammy Bess, came over about 2 hours before the fireworks would take place, and my wife and my daughter contacted them asking them to, if she cell phoned them, if the horse got out of control, they'd stop it. They tried to do that. The sounds were horrendous. And my wife didn't phone to complain about the fireworks. She was in an emergency in the barn where she got injured, the horse did. She phoned 911. I was out of town to ask for assistance. She was injured, as was the horse. Not to complain about the fireworks. And then after the fact, the sheriff never responded to that. The other incident where the new status came over to try to settle the issue, basically what it was we're going to do it. You have two options: move your horse or drug it, period. And that was not an option. Anyway, my point, as a way of background, I'm not a pyrotechnics expert, but I spent 28 years in the Marine Corps. I was a assistant division commander, and I've worked another 16 years as director of a federal agency. So I understand explosives. A 4- and 6-inch mortar, to put it in perspective, a 6-inch mortar for fireworks, a tube, is larger than the 120 millimeter indirect fire weapon that the Soviets used. And those of you that are in the military know what that's about. I agree with the ordinance as it's written, with one exception. I think the distance is unacceptable. A 6-inch and 8-inch mortar can be very, very lethal. And I think if you fully investigate any calamities that happened, and you can go back online and look at these things, you really need to look at about 1,500 to 2,000 feet to ensure that property is not damaged, the fallout from these things in a ecologically sensitive area, which is specifically the overrun that goes into Chesapeake Bay. There are federal statutes that cover that. We really should be sensitive. I'm all for fireworks. I contract for the fireworks at Quantico as one of the things, a minor thing that I do, but I know what's entailed in that, and I know what the stringent requirements are. And I'm just asking the board, take into consideration, rural preservation area. This hasn't been done for 20 years. We've lived there for 16 years. It's been the last 3 years. And so it's not something that we've all of a sudden had a beatific vision that this is something that we can't live with. My wife gave to the board petitions from 19 residents within the Petmire Hill corridor last year. So with that, I just ask you consider the distance between domiciles. And I think the minimum should be at least 2,000 feet. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Laughlin.
Last speaker on the list is Michael Linehan.
Good evening again. Michael Linehan, Bowling Green District. I had the pleasure of living at Bell Hill from 1993 to 1996. I was at the first fireworks display that was put on at Bell Hill, and I'm probably putting myself in an awkward position, but I provided the fireworks for that display. So there's been a fireworks display at Bell Hill, to my knowledge, and I've been at one for 24 years. All aerial fireworks, all aerial fireworks. In the last 3 or 4 years, they've been professionally done. They've been professionally done with permitted, done in an appropriate manner. Maybe before that, they might not have been so appropriate. I would encourage the board to look at the way fireworks might be done someplace else. I have a place at Chincoteague. Chincoteague has the most wealthy volunteer fire department in the United States of America. That fire department is supported by the Chincoteague ponies that are out on Assateague Island. The fireworks display on Chincoteague Island is put off across the street from an amusement park that is actively full of about 400 or 500 people on the nights that the fireworks display is put off. On either side of that fireworks display where the fireworks is put off, all aerial fireworks, on either side of that, it's put off in a parking lot smaller than the parking lot in front of this building. There are residences all up and down the main street of Chincoteague. And, you know, nobody's house is getting burned down. The bay, the intercoastal waterway, which is about 80 feet away from where this is going on, is not being polluted. I think that the ordinance, at least the ordinance as written that Patrick Newstadter spoke about, I think that can be lived with. I certainly think that having an ordinance that does regulate things and that can help folks be more responsible is certainly the way to go, and I would encourage the board to support that ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. As Mr. Pardner said, that is the last person that signed up to speak at this public hearing. However, we'll give you one last opportunity. If there's anyone who would like to speak in support of or in opposition to this ordinance repeal and replacement, please come forward, state your name and your voting district. Seeing no one coming forward, the public hearing is declared closed. The board has some questions of Mr. Garnett, and so, Mr. Garnett, you need to come to the podium. And Mr. Black, I believe you indicated you had a question.
Yeah, Mr. Garnett, we had talked last time, and I asked you a question. The 1,000 feet that we're talking about, would that prevent Mr. Newstadter from setting off fireworks on his property without the permission from the neighbors?
At the site that was last conducted of the last particular shoots, that falls within a 1,000-foot radius. There is some additional property that Mr. Newstadter owns. The field continues, and there's a section of wooded property that extends to the property line that would go over 1,000 feet. I'm not personally familiar with the topography there. I understand it does slope, so I can't speak if that would be deemed as a suitable, safe site. But purely based on distance, and especially if some trees were cleared, then he certainly would exceed 1,000 feet.
And Mr. Chairman, may I ask Mr. Newstadter a question?
Surely, go right ahead.
Mr. And you're okay with this ordinance? Yeah. As you are?
You can have a display that is 1,000 feet from the west, from the west, from their house. Mr. Taylor, let's wait.
Yes.
Mr. Taylor, Mr. Black, are you through?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Taylor.
Yes, Mr. Chairman and board members, first of all, I think that it's important that this board, as well as myself, look at the ordinance. Aside from the issues that might be faced by the families involved here. People in communities sometimes have issues. It kind of happens. It's unfortunate, but it does. But this board has a job of, first of all, looking at the zoning in a particular area, and we have the job of looking at the request and what that request, what the passing of that request or the denying of that request does to the area. This is rural preservation. Rural preservation basically means farming, animals, forest. That makes a big difference. When we think in terms of rural preservation, it is the area where you can have horses, chickens, pigs, other animals. You know, I may have a home in Belmont. If you would just be quiet for a minute so that I could finish. I appreciate that.
Wait a minute, Mr. Taylor. Mr. Seeley, you're constituting the entire public hearing. You have talked and been disruptive to other members listening to what's being said. I would ask that you listen. I promise you, I assure you, you will have your opportunity to ask questions and to make a statement and make a comment. But I do think it's just disruptive and it's disrespectful to the people that are speaking to this board. Most of us up here want to hear what is being said about the public hearing. So if you would please, just allow Mr. Taylor to finish his questions or his statement, whatever he's doing over there, and then we'll move on to Mr. Underwood, and I assure you you'll be the next in line after Mr. Underwood. Mr. Taylor.
Okay, and again, taking into consideration what's normally done in a rural preservation area and what's being done with this ordinance. I think it's the issue here. The fact that there has not been an injury, or the fact that no one has gotten seriously injured, is no reason to continue to allow situations to happen where injury is a real possibility. There is a trailer court with some 80 families that are in very close proximity to where these fireworks are being displayed. There's one way in that trailer court, and I can tell you a fire in that area could be very detrimental. Has there been a fire? No. But do we want to wait until there is a fire? Has any child been seriously injured or killed? No. But do we want to wait and give a child a chance to die before we make an ordinance that protects the people of that area? I think when we think about the concerns that we have, the supervisors here talked about what their concerns were. And every concern that they talked about has been addressed in this ordinance. We talked about the closeness, and we came up with the 1,000-foot rule. We talked about the possible injuries, and we came up with the $1 million bond. Again, this area is an area where we have animals and livestock. If you can't do it in rural preservation, where can you do it? So I would ask that this board would act on this ordinance that we asked this staff to come up with. This ordinance that we have addressed every issue that we had when the ordinance was made. Staff went back and they put in the concerns that each board member has. So what reason is there to not support the ordinance as it is written? Thank you.
Mr. Underwood, do you have any comments? Do you have any questions? Mr. Barnett.
Only one comment, Mr. Chairman. First of all, let me apologize for talking while Mr. Taylor was, I was part of the conversation also. So certainly I apologize to you, Mr. Taylor, my colleague. It's a very delicate situation, and I listened to Ms. Newstatter, and that we get to the point that we make a neighbor uncomfortable by putting manure on my property but close to your driveway so you can be uncomfortable. It's a sad day in this country when we can't talk, can't debate, can't disagree, and come up with something amenable to each other. So I'm saddened. You know, I have an issue in my district as well regarding fireworks, and so I'm certainly sensitive to the homeowner, and I'm also sensitive to the person who wants to do the fireworks. I don't think setting fireworks off in rural preservation changes rural preservation. It's a 30-minute, it's 45 minutes. It's still rural preservation. I just think it's a very delicate balance. I think it's one that we undertake because we chose to put ourselves in these seats. And so I think we will make a decision what we think is best for the residents and move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm sorry, Mr. Taylor, we did have a little conference going on here. I'm sorry for that. To me, any change we make in this ordinance isn't going to solve any problem. There are folks still not happy with what the ordinance says. They're still going to be able to do fireworks. We're not 2,000 feet. We're not 1,500 feet. We're not using air cannons. We've done nothing to the ordinance that already exists. The ordinance that exists requires insurance, it requires a permit, it requires fire and rescue to do something to make sure that everything is supposed to be done correctly. After all the time we've spent, I will say that I think that at the end, we're probably better off where we